I was inspired to change my career from finance to healthcare, and I began an occupational therapy degree at Canterbury Christchurch in September 2017. The Job Taster programme, for me, was fundamental to my successful recovery and my inspiration to stay well. It gave me hope for the future when I had none. I've often described mental illness as like a wrecking ball through our comfortable routines. For me, the desire to work and have a job has always been very important, as I've worked since leaving school at 18 and I thought I would not recover my career following my acute admission. The Job Taster programme has inspired me to become a qualified healthcare professional. My journey with the Trust has come full circle. I submitted my final assignment on the 11th of June and started with the Crisis and Resolution Home Treatment Team on the 15th of June, based at Priority House in Maidstone. On the 5th of October, I start a new role as a vocational specialist in Jeanette's team. And I cannot wait to help our clients achieve their employment goals. I could not be more proud to work for KMPT. In recent times, we hear more about mental health at work and corporations appointing mental health champions. KMPT are my mental health champions. They are trailblazers, in my opinion, for offering the Job Taster programme. As a mental health trust, they are saying to people with a mental health condition, we value the contribution you can make, and for people like me, that means so much. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for sharing your personal experiences with us, and we're very proud of the service, of course. And delighted to have you both here with us. So I think there'll be questions. People are so interested in how it's all going, so I just want to open it up really. Yes, Catherine.
I've got to say that is the best description of a service that I've heard in 4 years. If we have services that help people get their lives back, then that service is getting something right. I'm curious about two things. One, how have you operated or had to change how you're operating during COVID? And two, how do you think COVID and the new ways of working will change the way you work going forward?
Thank you. I agree with you. This is a fantastic service. So we were put on hold for 3 months. We are delighted that we're back providing a really essential service. We have been using it ourselves. It's been a lifesaver. We've been able to connect with our service users and employers via that platform. I see us continuing to use that. We mustn't forget the importance of the connectivity there. And it's balance right. So yes, I do believe we can still use that technology, but we must hopefully start to resume when we can working face-to-face with our clients and employers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Can I ask?
Yes.
It's fabulous to have you here. Joe, how lucky are we that you're now qualified and you're staying with us? When you're going to go to the academy, fabulous. Congratulations. I suppose I'm really interested. You've always been very ambitious in your service, Jeanette, and you've got new money coming in. If we roll forward 5 years, 10 years, what would you like to do?
A lot more staff.
Yeah.
I am in discussions with Nancy Livesey, our peer support lead, only this morning to create a pathway for our service users to go into peer support work and trust. That is our ambition, and Jackie and I spoke about it. So more staff, enabling more people to get work as part of their recovery, a really important part of their recovery. You know, and I love my job, I love the service because we do transform lives. You know, it's pure recovery. So, yes. Thank you.
Come on. Oh, Rod, sorry. Yes.
Hi, thanks. I'm told to stand up because I can't see the screen I'm doing the microphone. You mentioned the staff there. I'm on the workforce committee, we'll look at staff turnover, etc. How big is your team and
nurses. Most of them are part-time, 3 band 4s. But we have won the money to expand and to form a collaboration with the Shaw Trust and Porchlight. But that isn't enough, actually, in my opinion. The ambition of NHS England and IPS Grow is to significantly increase access to employment services for people with severe mental illness. So hence, working really hard to get that funding. Like I say, I've been in post 6 years, and it was my ambition to bridge the gap, reduce the postcode lottery. So that's it really. Did that answer your question?
Well, it did, but in addition, when you have a vacancy,
Yes.
you have, is it quite easy to fill? Is it a popular area to work?
It is. It's an attractive job. We also deliver workshops to Townsend Christchurch on our work, which does attract new graduates into the trust. It's quite an appealing role, so we are fortunate. Yes.
Thank you. You made reference to a postcode lottery there. Can you just give us a picture? Thank you.
So we only cover 8 of the CMHTs, and we're spread very thinly. So Shepway and Edgware don't have a service currently. However, in the bid that we were successful for, we are Porchlight are going to be covering those areas, and the Shaw Trust are going to be covering early intervention services with 3 staff. But historically, it has always been a very small, limited service for our service users.
Fiona, then Mary.
Fantastic, really well done, and it's really good to see how it's being showcased through the AHP, the NHS England piece as well, so I think it's a great innovation that you should be very proud of. I'm just interested to know how you sought your partners with the Shaw Trust and Porchlight, and how did you build that relationship to get to that very successful point in terms of getting inward investment?
Yeah, thank you for that. So we used to work in partnership with other third-party organisations, and although we wrote the bid, it then was transformed into an SCP bid, and they included the Shaw Trust and Porchlight into that collaboration. That's as far as I'm aware, yes.
Thank you. Mary.
Just to say well done once again. I'm sure you hear this all the time. I'm interested, so you're going to do some work with intervention and psychosis services, as well as expand the other mental health teams that you haven't been covering. What about other specialist community services? Are they in scope with the new monies that you're getting?
Not at the moment, no. We do try to provide input into personality disorder service, for instance, but because we are so stretched, the funding is just to deliver the service within community mental health teams at the moment. Yeah. Hopefully, with more money and staff, we can expand the service to deliver across all services. And in particular, older adult services. You know, we know that a number of people are getting early onset dementia who are in work. And you know, part of their journey is hopefully remain in work. And I have had some conversations with the older adult team on piloting something for a year to help their service users remain in work with that awful diagnosis.
So just 2 more questions, and then we will need to wrap up. Jackie and then Vincent.
Mine's not so much a question, it's just Jeanette and I work very closely on this together, and in terms of the previous discussions we were having in private board around working in partnership, this is very much what at a strategic level we made a considered decision that we want to work with third sector providers. Shaw Trust and Porchlight are very expert in this area, hence why we've gone into a partnership with them. However, that said, I think there are other opportunities at a local level, but when we do get more resource, more funding, we'll be able to do something at a more local level. And on that note, this is one of the 3 principal areas that as a system we must be funding in 2021 and 21-22. So there will be more national funding coming into this programme of work.
Good, thank you. Vincent.
Thanks, Jackie. Again, Jeanette, really wonderful piece of work. And I just also like to point out, our top of the discussion was why we also wanted to work with Shore Trust and Portlight, who we know are also the strategic partners to KMPT Council in terms of the social care aspect. So just really important, I think, just to recognise an old boss of mine used to describe as the 5 key things that keep you well. So that ability to have a roof over your head, some money in your pocket, in terms of the employment aspect, something to look forward to at the weekend, in terms of that optimism and thinking forward. So again, I think this is a really important area of our work that we need to see more of. We know that the majority of people that we are supporting are living in the community, and outside of the health support we offer, it is that social care and recovery orientated support that's really important to them. So thanks, Jeanette.
Thank you.
And on that note, we'd like to, are we allowed to give it in person? So a lovely upbeat note on which to launch into the business. So we have the minutes. Now I need to check. Have I done declarations of interest? Actually, I need to do them, don't I? Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Okay, thank you. So the minutes. Any inaccuracies or changes before we approve them? Mary.
Just a point on page 9 of board pad, and first paragraph, and it's the last 3 sentences, where it says there are a number of letters that have been delayed, so the trust. So it's not us who is responsible for the letter reviews. So it should read, so the CCG is being supported by Kent Community Health Trust, or rather the ICS is being supported by Kent Community.
Have you got that, Tony? No. Thanks, Mary. Sheila.
Thank you, Chair. Just one small one for me on the bottom of page 5. The last bullet point, it says the trust is working on its work backlog. It should say estate and maintenance backlog. Just so it's a bit clearer.
Yeah, Tony's got that, thanks. Otherwise, are you happy to approve?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so action log. I'm just looking down on the first page of the action log. I think it's easier to just take it page by page. The one thing we just need to decide on that one is about frequency of reporting about the Transform programme. Get a view from the board. Do you have a suggested frequency, Helen?
My sense is quarterly would make sense, particularly because progress on each of those areas is being reported to subcommittees in some form or other, always anyway, and quarterly would seem sensible to me.
Is everyone happy with that? Catherine?
So can I just for the sake of full understanding, just understand which committees are looking at which bits of this programme, just so we can check that we've got full oversight?
Yeah, sure. So my suggestion would be, rather than going on to buy items, could we just a table that sets out where they are, when we see a glass front appendix actually next to what board.
Thank you.
That would be good. Otherwise, we'll go for quarterly. And there's a gap just about the news article. Is that that we were just going to put in the reading room? Helen?
Yes, Chair. I think that happened. That was shared with us and went into the reading room, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah. It says, mine doesn't say completed, but that's fine. Good. And a tiny issue for me on the next page, which is that George probably won't be presenting in October, it'll be November, because October is a very diminished board for development day. Tiny issue. Any other issues? Those are the ones I spotted myself, but any other action? Comments? No? Let's move on then. Chair's report. I will take it as read, clearly, and I just would like the board to formally endorse my proposal to appoint Venu as interim deputy chair and Catherine as interim SID. Lovely. Thank you. Otherwise, I'll just take. I think there was one other thing I wanted to mention, and I just. We now, for the first time, have some associate non-execs and some non-execs. Actually, we also have a mix of directors and executive directors, and I just wanted to. It's for clarification, really, about how the board approaches this, which is we approach everyone at the board with absolute parity. And it is only when we come to the absolutely exceptional circumstances of a vote, which, when I've asked around, has never actually happened, but could technically happen, that then the kind of statutory stuff comes into play about who can and can't vote. So I just wanted to make that really clear in case there was any sense of, people having different powers or roles within the board. So it's new for us, and we're delighted to have a couple of associate non-execs, so that's really splendid. Okay, otherwise I have nothing to say, but I'm very happy to take any questions. Yes, Sean.
A couple of points from the visits. One it was just to say, as a new associate and head to the organisation, it was fantastic to be able to get out there, meet some of the staff just recently. There was a couple of points I just wanted to raise. One of them was around some of the personal hygiene areas when we went to, I think it was Fernward, and there was just some feedback that it was taking some time for some of the rectifications to happen. And I just wanted to seek some assurance really around sort of like response times and things like that, because one of the things that's coming through clear from staff was that personal hygiene is a really big issue for people when they're coming onto those acute wards. And the other angle was, I think it was when we was at Rivendell, was some questions around the capital plan and the transparency of that down to sort of like local managers about knowing where things were and when they were due. And I just seeking some assurance that area. The last one was around patient monies, and there seemed to be quite a complex procedure. And I realise we've recently seen that within the audit committee, but just looking into the future, if there were some thoughts around innovation and looking at perhaps a more card-based system, which could perhaps save time, which would also help patients integrate into society where actually cards are probably much more useful than cash at times. So just those areas.
Thanks for raising those. So Sheila and Mary, I don't know which of you is going to take which one.
Issues, Chair.
Yes.
So thanks for raising those 2 points, Sean. So as you probably picked up, I chair the Trust Capital Group, and in that group we have a schedule of prioritising all of the work that needs to be done. So there's a plan for the next 3 years of all of the estates that need to be refurbished. We also look at backlog issues. So Fernward, which is in Canterbury, is one of our older our oldest acute ward, so it is on the plan, but not for another 2 years. The issues around the repairs that need to be done have been escalated, and I can assure you that the state are responding to that. In relation to Rivendell, again, we've got a number of sort of bathroom facilities updates that need to be done in our rehabilitation units. They were part of our backlog, and with the additional money that we've got into capital now, we actually this week gave the go-ahead for the state team to go out tender. So, and I think because they are minor works, we should be able to press the go button on that really quickly. So I anticipate that should be resolved in the next 2 months. Yeah.
Further assurance as well, Sean. So in terms of kind of capital, as Mary said, they are on the list and they will be done probably within the next few months. We need to go through a procurement process, but you know that's all in hand. In terms of kind of the maintenance piece as well, just to pick that up. So obviously we do have an outsourced maintenance provider, but we do have monthly performance meetings with them to make sure that they're delivering as we expect them to the contracts. I'm more than happy to kind of share any further details with you as well. And with regards to patient monies, that's literally not long transferred to me from Mary, so we absolutely do need to be looking at kind of electronic ways. We've got 4 ways at the moment that are very, very manual, so that's something that me and my team are picking up.
Great. Thank you. Thanks. And actually, we had talked, hadn't we, about keeping a log of non-executive things coming up from non-executive visits. And I wonder if that's just a simple way of collating things. I mean, they're often simple queries, actually, but I think it would be nice to kind of keep a log of them, perhaps.
You need to check. We have got that trust secretariat uptake, haven't we? It's been running for a number of months.
Oh,
So
okay.
we're able to go back and say, has that been done? Has that been done? If we've changed something, have we sustained that change? So
Great.
perhaps we'll put that region and some people as well.
Lovely, thank you. And anything else on the Chair's report? No. I'll move on to Helen, your report.
Thank you, Chair. It has been phenomenally busy. Wherever you touch the organisation, we last met as a board in July. Obviously, we did have a board meeting in August, and the level of activities in common with all the organisations like ours up and down the country have been extremely high. And we're very conscious that we're working with some very poorly people who've never needed our services before. So our staff are working extremely hard, and you can see some of that playing out in the integrated quality and performance report, the IQPR, that we're going to talk about later. So it's very important that we understand the detail behind all of that. Great to see over the summer that we've now got real medical students really starting in a medical school that we never thought we'd have in the county. We are one of only 3 new medical schools nationally. This county has long wanted a medical school in order to be able to grow our own doctors of the future. And I think it's fair to say that actually we didn't think at one point we would ever get one, so we were delighted 3 years ago when the announcement was made that we would have one, and it's just wonderful that now we've got real students on the patch, and even more wonderful that this organisation agreed, the board decided I think nearly a year ago now, that we would sponsor our own medical students, so it's just wonderful.
health teams in particular, who hold the bulk of people on their caseloads who are subject to CPA. We also are beginning to see a levelling out of the use of our psychiatric intensive care unit beds, and this is positive. What we have seen, however, in month is a small use of those beds out of area for male patients who normally we are able to look after that group of patients on our PQ, our psychiatric intensive care unit, the Willows, but due to the acuity that we're seeing that is across all of our services, in particular our inpatient services, high levels of acuity, we have had to go out of area for a number of people, but they were only out of area for a short space of time, and they were repatriated as quickly as possible. We also have a positive piece of work with a provider who is providing our female PQ, and there's more about that in my COOS report later. I think the only other area that I'd really like to pick out in terms of effective is, I think, in terms of the average length of stay across both adult and older adult wards. It is really positive that we've got a very effective patient flow team, which works across the acute wards, our crisis teams, and supports discharge. And I think that team that operates 24/7 really helps our inpatient wards to ensure that we've got effective flow. That does not mean to say that people are not are discharged from hospital inappropriately, which links back to the point around readmission rates, and we carefully review our readmission rates connected to our average length of stay. There is a report that's been written for Quality Committee on our readmission rates, and it's due to be reviewed in October. I think the one area around average length of stay, though, that's important to note is that the turnaround, so that the number of patients that come into the ward is much higher than perhaps was previously experienced by acute inpatient wards. And that can put demands on the staff, because people who, when they first come into a psychiatric inpatient unit, tend to be very, very unwell, and therefore the staff are working consistently with groups of people who are incredibly unwell, and that can put a strain on our workforce. And Mary and I, with Sandra, we're doing a lot of work to ensure that those particular members of staff get the support that they need to be able to work in that environment.
Thanks, Jackie. On that, may I ask a question before opening it up to others? Because on that note, it came up during conversations in the heat of the kind of COVID crisis that not all our restrooms were ideal. And I completely understand why that might be the case, but I wondered whether that was a priority for really trying to sort that out. I think it makes a difference, doesn't it? Sandra? Can you all bring your microphones a little bit closer to you? Thanks.
Is that better?
Yes. Much better.
We've recognised that we haven't got suitable space for staff in all areas, so we might have kitchens but not a relaxing room. And so we talked yesterday at EMT about having a plan, because we can't do everything all at once. In some areas there's not the space at the moment, in other areas we could convert space, but going back out to staff with that plan so that they know what's planned when and that it is on the agenda.
Great. Thank you. And any other questions in relation to those elements? Jackie? Nicola, please, go ahead.
A very naive question, I'm sure, but the readmissions after 28 days, why is that a measure? Why do you use that as a measure? Is it a reflection of the service, or is it...
It's national trajectory. I think the thing is that one would hope that somebody is recovered sufficiently enough and that the community
engage with that person to prevent a very quick readmission. So when we present the report to Quality Committee next month, what you will see is there's quite a small, well, it's not quite, it's a very small group of people tend to make up the readmission rates, and there's particular diagnosis that is often related to that very small group of people. So it's something, it's important because you need to be understanding why these people perhaps continually are readmitted. But why it's 28 days, if I'm honest, it's a national trajectory.
Thank you.
And we'll maybe put, after we've discussed it at Quality Committee, we'll put a note in the report to the board, so that will help explain things. Let's move on then. Great. Workforce, Sandra, will move on because we've got a full workforce report in a minute. And then finance, likewise, Sheila. Sheila's used to being caring. So this will be Mary.
So again, this month, news slight reduction in our complaints. And in terms of our performance and our acknowledgement of complaints within 3 working days, and also responding to a full complaint after investigation, we've been able to do that for all of the complaints that have been in the system, 100% of the time. So that's really positive news. Similarly, reopened complaints, we've only got 1, and that was because there was some additional questions that were raised in the findings, so we're working through that. Again, a positive note from that perspective. The Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsmen have restarted their work now, so they're picking up all of the cases that they would have been working on in the last couple of months that they paused due to COVID. We referred 1 case that they decided not to take any further action on, and the others, they are still in progress, and we'll wait to hear in due course. We had a very detailed, again, discussion at our Quality Committee about the nature and the themes of complaints, and what, if anything, we can do as an organisation if we were to pick perhaps 2 areas. There was a helpful suggestion that perhaps if we focus just on customer care, so customer care and staff attitude type complaints, that should really make a difference to people's experience who contact our services. So we've taken that on board and we'll start working on that. We did deliver customer care training in the organisation 2 years ago, really made an impact in terms of the reduction of complaints that had an attitude sort of theme. So we'll be picking up that training again. You will see under outcomes of closed matters, some percentages in terms of the types of complaints that have been upheld, not upheld, and so forth. So useful measure of the sort of rather confirmation, the concerns that people will be raising, and to what extent that plays out in our investigation process. We had paused the patient-reported experience measures as part of our whole suite of seeking formal views from service users on their experience. We've now been given the go-ahead to restart that, so that we relaunched that in September. However, the friends and family test nationally won't be recommencing until December, but because the patient friends and family test question is the first question on our prem, it means we're just going to start hearing people's views anyway on that. And then finally, just to say, so while we haven't been doing any formal sort of surveys and gathering feedback in that sort of formal way from our patients or from our carers, however, through Vincent's team who are engaging with the wider community, and we know from the work that we've done with Health Watch and as part of the integrated care system, we are getting feedback about people's experiences of using our services. So there was a huge survey that was done across all of the health service providers
It's very, very small proportion of that, less than 2%, were people who touched our sort of services. The feedback, it doesn't come as a surprise. There's some people who worked really well to the technology and responded to it well, in the sense that if they couldn't be present to attend, say, a care program approach meeting, they were able to dial in, and the family were able to dial into the virtual platform, so that was positive. But we recognize that that doesn't work for everybody. So as part of our thinking and considerations in one of our Recover and Transform work stream, which is the digitally enabled work stream, we are looking at all of that, the quality impact of using virtual platforms for all of our, for the diverse needs of our patient group. As part of our trust-wide patient and carer experience group, which I chair, and we've got members of, we've got attendees and membership from some of our third sector organizations, as well as people with the lived experience and their carers. The anecdotal feedback is that we have responded remarkably well as an organization and adjusted the way that we work with people, so we're able to continue with service provision. So that was happening to hear, actually. People were on the receiving end of us, telling us what it feels like. So I'll pause there, Chair.
Sean.
Yes, thank you for that, Chair. Thank you, Mary, for that overview. I was just going to pull out one point from my first time looking at this particular report was sometimes we tend to focus a bit more on the negative than the positive. And I think when you look at the compliments that the Trust has had in there, to my mind, that's quite a high level in ratio to the complaints. And I just wondered, are we pulling out of that the real good practice that our customers, patients liked from us? And two, on page 67 of Diligent, I just thought that warranted a similar graph on there for the compliments. But just my thoughts.
We've been working on compliments, and Mary, do you want to sort of mention next steps?
Yes. So one of the things that we're going to do with compliments, so through our dated system, which is where we log all of our complaints, incidents, and compliments, we're going to start theming the sort of things that people are really happy about. So again, we can share that with the rest of the organization. And then the second aspect of that work, when we do get compliments, doing a bit more of a follow-up conversation with the individuals, just to really test out what was it about our interaction that was positive. So again, we can reinforce some of that practice. So our PALS team will be doing that as the compliments are coming in, asking some additional questions and just following it through. But you're absolutely right. I don't think we always play out some of this really positive stuff. I guess that's why when I started off with the safety domain, because actually it's usually unsafe things that we're talking about, it was helpful to sort of bring an element of positive aspect. But I take your point about the compliments. So thank you.
Great. Any other? We'll move on to responsive then.
Okay, that's back to me, and I was going to start with a positive. I think there's two really good positives in the responsive dashboard. Certainly our early intervention and psychosis services in terms of the standard that is required of them nationally, and that just tells a tiny sort of portion of the picture that they do. It's in a very good place. So they've met that standard for 12 months, which I think is fantastic, particularly when you take COVID into consideration. And the other team that I would like to pull out, and I think for me, on a personal level, having life-sized into a couple of these teams over COVID, I would like to pay, highlight them particularly, is our liaison services, who obviously during COVID were shoulder to shoulder with their A&E colleagues, and again they've maintained really high standards and actually improved on their metrics for seeing people as quickly as possible. So I think they're very positive elements to the responsive dashboard. The area that I'm not so happy about is our referral to assessment and our 18-week referral to treatment. I think if Mark was in the room, he'd be quite clear as the FPC chair, that the information provided doesn't tell the whole story. If you delve into this information by team, there is significant variance across our community mental health teams. However, that said, there are a number of factors that impacted on our community mental health teams, and particularly older adults, when memory assessment services had to cease early on in COVID, and what we're seeing here is an element of backlog. However, that said, there is certainly work to be done in terms of improving our response, and there will be a recovery plan coming to FPC, Finance and Performance Committee, in October. I'll leave it there, and if anybody's got any questions.
Helen has a question.
I do, thank you, Chair. Jackie, I'm glad you highlighted that, because that's so not where we want to be. Good to hear that we've got an action in train, but for assurance sake, at what point will we, where are we setting our expectation that we'll be back on track for that service?
So we've got a new head of service at the moment who's come in 2 weeks ago. She's been given until the end of October to get a position with my deputy. Obviously, in terms of the memory assessment service, they're now looking at virtual opportunities, which they're very, very new. They're nationally very, very new. So in terms of giving you a date in terms of when we can be back to where we were, that's difficult today, because we're having to totally redesign how we provide that service. If I could come back to board next month through Finance and Performance Committee.
Okay, I'm going to press you on that, because I think 6 weeks sounds way too far off for me.
Okay.
I'd like to take it out as an action, Chair, if I might.
Yeah.
Outside this, and if we need to put some extra resource in to get us back to where we need to be, let's do that, because it's too important to let it drift.
Yeah,
6 weeks
fine.
feels too far off. I think in 6 weeks we could get much clearer. My second question is about the cancellations on first appointments.
Yeah.
To see that we are, if this is accurate, then we are cancelling our pet 20% of our pet, 1 in 5. That can't be right, can it?
So myself and Sheila are working. It's quite a complicated picture, Helen, in that this takes in a broad brush of reasons for cancellation. So, for example, if a patient rings up to cancel an appointment, it's in this set of metrics. There's about 30 different reasons for cancellation, and we're working on that through the data quality group, which Sheila is now chairing.
Can I press you on that one, please? Because I've been moaning about cancellations for 4 years, and every time I've been told it's complicated. So I know it's complicated. I got that 4 years ago, and I'd really like to sort of push you on finding solutions. Sheila.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So, as Jackie said, I'm chairing the Data Quality Committee now, so I'm expecting a report back next month to the committee, so in October, which will cover DNAs and the trust cancellations, but also referrals, because we have talked about in the past being the top or third referrer in the country that we receive in terms of referrals, and we're doing some work, and I've seen some early work of that where I do think there are some major data quality issues, so I'm expecting them to come back to the next committee. So I'm happy to update next month at board.
Okay, thank you. Jackie? Yes, we thought you wanted to speak, Mark. And Tom as well. Let's go, Mark. Yeah. I'm going to hold you up to the microphone a bit, Mark, so everyone else can hear you.
Gosh, that is rather concerning. Just to add a little colour to what Helen has said and what Jackie has said, I think we gave this a good going over in FPC, but I think it's important for the board to appreciate. If I look at page 69 of the report, which is the dashboard for responsive, the 4-week weight is shown as 83.9%, and the 18-week weight is shown as 78% for the trust overall. So you would look at that and say that's not far off 95%. I think the issue for FPT was that if you said the exception we all want to know about as a board was, are there any teams operating at less than 60%? What we would find is that the older adult, every single older adult team would fail that test, both on 4-week wait and 18-week, and a number of the younger adult teams would fail that as well. Some of them would be down at less than 20%. And the reason I add a little bit of granularity to the discussion to date is because I think there is clinical risk associated with large numbers of people, in particular postcodes, not being seen on a timely basis. That would be one point. And secondly, I think we do need to find, the exec need to find a way of adapting the IQPR so that we can give a rounded or balanced or true view, if you like, not only of the overall average within the trust, but where exceptions exist within teams that may cause flare-ups and risks at a board level that we are not cited on at the moment. I appreciate there's not a desire to embarrass any particular team, and I get that, but I think that there is a balanced medium point that says, you know, if not a single older adult team is achieving 60% on a target of 95, and some are down at 13% on some of these metrics, the board really ought to know about that. That would be the first point. The second is that there is no way that that is going to recover anywhere near 95% in 6 weeks. And so team level trajectories that are credible, you know, to get from 13% or 18% to closer to 95 or a reasonable target, you know, it's a more granular answer, I think, that's required. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. And Tom, have I got that right? You wanted to make a point?
No, it's Kim.
Kim, I'm so sorry. It's the masks. It's difficult to hear, isn't it?
Sorry, I am smiling. It was a question over all the dashboards, but particularly as a good example on the responsive one on the first line. So I see that we have, it's a great result, Jackie, and you say you're very proud of that. But the national target, 60%, you've smashed that all year. Do we have a process where we set our own stiffer local targets on some of these areas so that we really push that continuous improvement part through?
Jackie, do you want to answer?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we're doing some work on the IQPR more generally. So certainly early intervention psychosis standard is actually a national target, and we as an organisation must attain 60% and above. And you're absolutely right, of course we can set our own trajectory against that one. There are other targets within the IQPR that we've set locally that are not set nationally, and actually we've set ourselves quite a lot higher than the national sort of benchmarking data. So I think it's a really good question. I think it's a real opportunity for us to build in a full review of all our IQPR standards and where we set ourselves.
Yeah.
Jackie, I just wanted to pick up about the comment about the older adults referral to assessment, and the point that you made that NHS England has only very recently come out with advice on virtual memories clinics. I suppose it's just to seek assurance that you're not going to try and reinvent the wheel, and you're going to learn from, you know, other mental health trusts that are trying to do the same thing, because we need some pace on this.
Yeah.
I think recognising that what you will also see is a lag in terms of your dementia diagnosis rate, which is probably going to fall even lower. So I think it's just a flag that to the board as well.
I mean, there are a couple of issues there, and you're absolutely right. So work had obviously started pre-COVID on how we could improve our memory assessment programme regardless. I think one of the key issues for us as an organisation is that unusually, as a mental health trust, we are the sole provider of memory assessment, which is very unusual. It's much more usual to have a shared responsibility with primary care, with geriatricians, etc. So that's work that we've escalated up to the wider dementia group that hopefully will begin to start reporting to our Mental Health Improvement Board, because I think we do need to drive a different discussion around memory assessment. But in terms of what we're doing, we're linking with the Surrey Sussex Kent partnership, and we are having a look. Surrey have had some very successful outcomes in terms of nurse-led virtual clinics, and we're hoping to trial something that's called TICS, which I did write the name down for, and I'll make sure that it gets put in there. Oh, Afifa knows.
Let's take this detail out of the room, shall we? Because Fiona's made a good point, and you've clearly got a response. Jackie absolutely recognised that. So it may be there's a conversation to be had about, you know, the off-the-shelf, so to speak, solution. I don't mean it quite as glibly as that, but that we can have that conversation outside the room. Okay, I'm going to move us on actually. After that slightly difficult conversation about responsiveness, we have areas we have to focus on, and then other areas that are doing well, and it's a constant, it's sort of moving around, keeping on top of things. So I absolutely accept that. Can we move on to Sheila, your finance report?
Thank you, Chair. So I'll take the report as read. So for month 5, we've produced a break-even position as per the new kind of COVID finance regime we're living with currently. Guidance has now been issued, so it was issued on Friday last week for months 7 to 12. I'll just pick up a little bit later on planning on where we are with that in the trust currently. We've spent 3.2 million year to date on COVID. We received 700,000 as a top-up to ensure that as a trust we do break even currently. There are a few emerging pressures you can see in the report. One of them is around our psychiatric intensive care, so we do have a number of patients that are out of area. That is moving down in the right direction and has been over the last few months, which is really good. The emerging pressure which a number of us as ENT are working on at the moment is agency. So our costs have increased quite significantly in the first 4 months of this financial year. So last year, in total for the full year, we spent £6 million on agency. The current forecast is looking like we're going to spend 8 million, so a 2 million increase year on year. Now that's in 2 areas predominantly, which is one, the acute care group, which is looking like it's around their rotas and what they're running in terms of their wards. And then the second one is our community recovery care group, where we have had investment for mental health investment standard this year. But they've seen quite a significant increase in their agency usage year on year, but also in it's a positive that they've recruited an additional 40 members of substantive staff as well, and that was our plan. But we've asked for a macro piece of work really to understand what's going on, how the 50 staff that we have recruited are adding value to making sure that we're delivering the performance that we need to. So there are plans in place. I think the biggest thing that we can see around agency is our usage, but it does link back to what we're paying in terms of rates. So there is a meeting that's taking place later this afternoon with myself, Sandra and Afifa are having with the Associate Medical Directors with a particular focus on medical agency spend at the moment. In terms of cash, we're in a really positive position. We've got 30.5 million in the bank, and as I've said every single month, we are carrying an additional month's worth of income at the moment, and that was done at the start of COVID, so that's an additional 15 million to what we'd normally have. So we're in a good place from a cash point of view. Cost improvement plans, our annual target is 5.9 million. We do have a gap of £2 million at the moment. We talked about this at Finance Committee. There are a number of ideas that are coming through from the care groups and from us as support services as well, but there is quite a bit to do to be able to kind of deliver that. I think some of it will probably be on a non-recurrent basis in the latter part of the year, and we actually had a conversation and Peter asked me a question at Finance Committee. Would we probably deliver the 2 million? I was quite honest and said probably not at this stage as we're approaching the last 6 months of the year. Capital, we've spent 60k in August, 1.5 million year to date. We heard earlier in private board, you know, we're going to deliver probably, our ambition is to deliver the biggest capital plan we have in a number of years this year. Some really key projects going on and a lot to do in the latter part of the 6 months. I just wanted to kind of touch on the phase 3 planning that we're all doing across the NHS. So the guidance has been released. We are, as I said, heading for a potential forecast of a £5 million deficit for KMPT for this year. We've been set a control total of £1 million. There's currently a £4 million gap that we're working through. This only came out the latter part of last week. Now, there are a number of actions we know we can take, and I've just touched on one of them, which is actually finding the gap in the CIPs that we currently have. The other thing is around agency. So what can we do to deliver a better rate and have some negotiations with our suppliers around agency? We've also got an element of our contingency that we always plan for year on year that we haven't used. So could we release that on a non-recurrent basis? Not ideal because it's non-recurrent, but to ensure that we do deliver the target that we've been set by NHSI/England. And there's also a further conversation we really need to have with the system because they've changed phase 3 planning. So all of the COVID costs and the top-up costs that we have will be sitting with the ICS. So it's for us as providers to work with the system to ensure that we get a share of the COVID costs and also top up the supporters that we've seen in the first 6 months. So a lot to do. Our plan has to go in on the 5th of October. We talked about it at Finance Committee in some detail, and I also said that I would share a more detailed kind of presentation outside of the normal timetable just before we submit on the 5th of October. That's probably it from a finance point of view, but happy to take questions.
Any questions? Venu? Can you use your microphone, please?
A comment really, which is I attended FPC for the first time. It was a really good meeting. And we did indeed spend some detail, and everything was explained really clearly. So just to say that the detail on each of the areas which Sheila has outlined was really fully explored. The second thing was that this is the first time, as I understand it, that the money has gone to the system here, the ICS here, which I think is also just worth saying a bit more about maybe, just because of the constant changing system. Could you just say a bit more about that, Sheila?
Yeah, happy to. And we talked about this at the beginning of the financial year before obviously COVID, where our financial recovery fund that you receive if you're in deficit like we was going to was a potential risk for us because 50% of it was going to be driven by the system performance. So we talked about it then, but obviously we've had COVID and the regime has changed. Now all of the control totals that have been set have been at a provider level, but also at an ICS with the CCG, where they will hold the latter part, which is the top-up costs and the COVID costs. So it's really important that for us as the only mental health provider of adult services in particular in the county, have a really good relationship with the ICS so that we can draw on them funds to support us in the latter part of the year. But it will be a big change, and that's why I think it's important we do have a discussion outside of the normal timetable of Finance Committee so that they're aware in terms of how then the discussions have gone with the ICS.
To what extent, this is perhaps, well, it's a question to several of you, but I was wondering around agency, to what extent new ways of working and workforce modelling, at what speed and what impact it could have on agency as well. Yes, Sandra.
Yeah, so it absolutely will, and we have started that work now. We need to make sure that there aren't any barriers, and I go back to the comment about the partnership working. The other thing is that across Kent, in entirety, we use a lot of agency, and it makes it very difficult for us to control those rates over cap. And I think as an organisation, and this is what the meeting is for this afternoon, we've got to start looking at where we can serve notice to people we've got in on agency over cap and redistributing that work differently, because that will send a very clear message out to the outside world that we're not going to tolerate those rates anymore because we've got lots over the cap. And just thinking about different ways of delivering that clinical service, but we're going to tackle that this afternoon.
And so there'll be a strategy going to the Workforce Committee, will there, or sort of clear action plan or something? I'm just thinking about, really thinking about when. I know you've been working on it for a while. I know there have been obstacles. I'm just keen to have a time scale, really.
Well, we've set up the workforce modelling group. We can report back in November as our next workforce committee as to where we are with that. I've had the kick-off meeting with the acute care group and the older adults care group who are going to work together to deliver a different model in Priority House, and that will be the start of what we think about moving forwards.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. Feedback.
Can I just add a little bit?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Get a little bit closer.
Is that better? Okay, good. Just wanted to add a little bit on further to what Sandra said. So on the acute care group in Priority House, we've already started to use skill mix and so other roles in instead of doctors where we can't recruit to the staff grade post. We've got a nurse consultant who was appointed, who's working really, really well with the consultant psychiatrist. She's also the ACP lead for the organisation, so we are progressing ACP posts. We've got 3 trainee ACPs again going really well. So we are looking at other ways of delivering the work on the wards. By the end of October, the acute care group AMD is going to come back with a model. So it is work that is progressing rapidly now.
Thank you for that feedback, Helen.
Thank you. Chair, I sense your impatience and I share it to a degree, although I know that the work is underway. We've talked to my team about the fact that actually, you've heard this afternoon that we're working in an environment where we've never been busier and the wards in particular, or inpatient areas, have never been more acute. So I think the question that we've got to consider is, do we need to bring in some more resource to help people think differently and to be more radical? It's been interesting talking to colleagues who've recently joined the organisation about, so where are we going to get this new workforce from them, because we've got significant investment coming to us in order to drive the changes. My view is that we've got a fabulous opportunity. In fact, you had a really good example of it this afternoon. People who've used our services who are the most fantastic contributors to changing the agenda and driving the quality of our services up. So recruiting people who have direct personal experience of using mental health services is key, as is really challenging ourselves to think differently. So I know my team are working very hard on it. I think we might need to think about bringing some additional resource in order to get this underway. So with your agreement, Chair, we'll bring an update to the next meeting on that.
Thank you, absolutely. Any other questions on finance? Catherine?
Just on the agency point, obviously we spent a lot of time at FPC on this on Tuesday. I think one of the things, the minor things that we were surprised to find, that there has been a usage of unapproved agencies. We had a thing called the Golden Key a while ago. That's gone into abeyance. And I think those of us who've been on the board for some years will remember that very early on in Mary's tenure, we had an agency overuse just at the year end, and the brakes were put on. Mary did a fantastic job about reintroducing grip into the organisation. So in summary, my point is, we've had COVID times, we've had to do things to keep our patients safe, but probably now is the time to reintroduce that grip question, that should the Golden Key come back.
For completeness, we have had exactly that discussion, Catherine, and it is something that we are considering.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, great, we'll move on. Thank you, Sheila. And a coup report, Chief Operating Officer. Jackie, should we are there issues you'd like to bring to our attention, or should we just open it up for questions?
No, we'll open it up for questions. I think almost, as always, everything we've been discussing today has been touched on. The only areas I would like us to note is that obviously we're moving into new restrictions with regards to COVID, and obviously our services, we work very closely with our acute hospital colleagues, so winter planning is well underway at the moment, and that's something that I think, I know nationally is being ratcheted up, and obviously today we're being encouraged to have our flu vaccinations, but those are key elements for me and my team. And I think the only other thing I'd like to add is that despite COVID, actually, a number of new developments have continued. So a lot of work was happening pre-COVID, and I think positively a lot of those pieces of work have continued to develop despite COVID, which again I think is positive and stands us in good stead going forward.
Thank you, Jackie. Any questions on Jackie's paper? Vincent.
Thanks, Chair. My question is just to Jackie about the 24/7 crisis line. Just recognise the huge support that this provided in the first wave of COVID and acknowledge that we're moving towards the peak in our services. I just wondered if Jackie could give us an update on when do we expect to hear from commissioning in terms of a decision about funding that service.
So certainly Sheila and I, we've completed the business case. It is with the commissioners as we speak. Sheila probably has a more up-to-date position than I do.
It's fine, I'm happy to. Thanks, Jackie, Vincent. So there, it is with the commissioners, it's on the priority list. So we should be able to think about how we start recruiting in the next kind of 4 weeks.
Fantastic. That's very good news. Okay, workforce.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I've included a few extra slides at the beginning for the benefit of the non-exec directors that haven't been part of our people strategy and how we formed that. So we have 5 key areas in our current people strategy, which is recruitment and retention, team management and leadership development, culture and employee engagement, health and wellbeing, and diversity and inclusion. We then received the final version of the National People Plan, which had quite a different look to the interim People Plan, and that was due to COVID. And their key priorities are looking after our people, belonging in the NHS, new ways of working and delivering care, and growing for the future. And they also have a people promise, which covers compassionate and inclusive leadership, recognise that staff are recognised and rewarded, that they have a voice that counts, that they are safe and healthy at work, they're always learning, they can work flexibly, and we are all a team. And that people promise is going to form what the staff survey looks like moving forward. So from next year, the staff survey will measure those areas. So it's really important we start to introduce that to our staff now and capture the things that we do under those headings. So we will be re-looking at our people plan to make sure that it covers those areas. They're in there, but we need to frame it in the right way. There were some things that we have to do immediately in line with the National People Plan, and the first one was to appoint a non-exec director as our wellbeing lead, and Kim, I understand you've taken that role on. So we will be working closely with Kim on that. And the other areas were 2 areas that we have to have conversations with staff around health and wellbeing, and where there are health and wellbeing issues, we need to have a proper plan in place for them. And the second area is that flexibility becomes the norm. And so we are incorporating in our supervisions towards the end of the year those 2 conversations to make sure that they happen. And it was interesting because it was actually at the QPRs recently, there were a number of staff that left from a certain area in the business, and part of that was work-life balance, so that's the flexibility question. I've then gone on to look at our challenges, and we've already heard that recruitment is one of our challenges. We have approximately 100 nurse vacancies across the organisation at the moment, which we're trying to recruit to. And we have about 28 medical vacancies, that's consultants and specialty doctors. We've got a number of things in place to look at those. So we've got a medical staffing programme board, which Afifa and I chair together. So we're looking at the workforce model there. And we've got the work that I alluded to earlier, which was the work at Priority House to look at a new model. Well, Sheila's already covered temporary staffing, and I had on my slide there, Catherine, that we're going to look at revisiting the Golden Key, but we're also having weekly reports, and a number of us in the exec meet weekly to review the areas that are high on agency usage. And where, Catherine, you also alluded to people working off framework, They are compliant, but it's the rate card that's not right. And so we've asked, it's in community recovery, we've asked them to look at actually releasing those people from the business as long as they've got a plan B that sits behind it. Looking at apprenticeships, I'm really pleased to say that we've started our trainee nursing apprenticeship, nursing associate apprenticeship, and also our registered nurse degree. We had 30 applicants for the trainee nursing associates, and we had 51 applicants for the registered nurse degree apprenticeship. And we've appointed 10 trainee nursing associates and 9 for the nurse degree programme. That was our first programme this year, and in the true spirit of reflection and learn, we had some hiccups. And so we've done, with the heads of nursing and Mary, we've done a reflection process so that when we go into next year, it will be much smoother. And I've listed there the feedback that we got through that process. On retention, our retention rate is 10.2% at the moment against a target of 10.5%. We still have some key hotspot areas across the organisation, particularly in staff that join us in between 1 and 3 years. A high percentage of those staff leave. So we're doing work around that with the business partners. We're looking at reviewing our return and retire processes. Appraisal and supervision, making sure that is fit for purpose and does what it's meant to do. And we continue to work on our staff engagement through our culture work. Just to give a little bit of context behind the culture work, we've probably been running this now for nearly 2 years, where we've done a concentrated programme where many of our staff contributed to what the organisation should look like moving forwards. And through the work that we've done with them, we came up with our cultural heart, which drew out 3 key themes. And that was, we wanted a just and learning approach. We wanted people to be able to learn from their mistakes and to move away from being very punitive in the organisation. An empowered team of teams came out, and we've certainly heard through COVID that teams have felt more empowered, and we absolutely need to capture that and make sure we don't lose it and go back to where we were. And then the third area was that everybody lives and breathes the values. Under that work, we set up a cultural programme board, and there are 6 work streams that have just been kicked off, which are our policies and processes. They need to align with a just and learning culture, and psychological safety for our staff. Under an empowered team of teams, employee engagement and agile working, and we talked earlier about how important the agile working will link into being able to provide proper facilities and that for our patients and our staff. And looking at an empowered team of teams and what does good look like, what have we learned from COVID, and what do we make sure we need to keep in place moving forwards. And then under the values, embedding values across the organisation and authentic, compassionate leadership, and that's clinical and non-clinical. We've talked about health and well-being, and we've recently been awarded the Bronze Award for a healthy workplace in Kent, and we have been told that we can put an application into Fast Track to Gold, which is great. There's lots of work going on. We're continuing to train mental health first aiders in the organisation. The NHS health checks have replaced the staff MOT. We're looking at the development of the Schwartz rounds on wards and in the organisation. We're providing psychological support for our staff. We've enhanced our occupational health and staff counselling offers. Again, the restrooms through the Recovery and Transform programme, we're putting in place the plan for the restrooms, and we've got our pilot running in acute of our health and wellbeing advisor, which currently is going really well, and that's where we've got our first work plan from. On the next slide, you'll just see our staycation, which we now have on the bottom of our email signatures, which is encouraging staff to take their holidays, and a number of other trusts have now pinched that from us. On diversity and inclusion, I was pleased to say that we achieved 98.8% risk assessments for all our BAME staff. And we are running a joint conference with the Kent Fire and Rescue Service, Kent County Council and Kent Police and the Prison Service in November to celebrate 10 years of the Equality Act being in place. On the authentic and compassionate leadership, we continue to work to improve leadership in the organisation. We've got our leadership development programme. I know Jackie and Fiona have kindly agreed to mentor as part of that programme clinical leaders, and we're currently doing a gap analysis with the clinicians as to what good clinical leadership would look like and what we can put in place for them. Moving on, we've got a staff survey coming up. We're just about to launch that, and our target response rate this year is 68%. We achieved 66% last year. For the benefit of the new non-execs, 4 years ago we were at 41% on a staff survey response rate, so it has increased significantly over the years. And we've set ourselves as a target of 7.2 for an engagement score. And I'm also responsible this year for the flu campaign, and we need to achieve 90% first at frontline staff being vaccinated. So we're going through our planning at the moment, and we have again this year put in place that if we achieve the 90% frontline staff being vaccinated, as an organisation we'll pay £15 per head into the local health and wellbeing budgets. So that's a significant amount of money. It would cost us £51,000 if we achieved that. So to encourage staff to stay healthy. We've got our 2020 staff awards coming up, and again these will be very different this year. So we'll be live streaming the awards and they will be hosted from Farm Villa. And then just to finish off, I just wanted to touch on our KPIs. So the one that I haven't spoken about is sickness, and we are running at 4.1% against a target of 4.22%. If you take the COVID sickness out, we're actually running at 3.83. And if we think back 3 years ago, we were running at 5% sickness. So that's a major achievement. And we currently have only 18 staff out of the organisation self-isolating due to COVID. All bar 4 of our staff that were shielding are back in the business, and none of them have been redeployed. They are doing their jobs with some adjustments. So a good result there. So any questions?
Thank you, Sandra. Sean?
Yeah, a few quick questions for me. Firstly, I just wondered on the it's like introducing new people into the organisation again, thinking a little bit wider. The military are always looking at like retrain and sort of like recruit people back in, and I realise there are specialist posts within KMPT, but is that one that we're interacting with was one question. The retire and return that you talked about in there, I just wondered, are there abatement issues for staff within that in relation to pensions? Because again, that's quite a risky one. And the third point was just going to be, again, positive one. I think in the report it talks about the number of long-term sicknesses that you got back into the workplace in August, which was about 24, which I thought was really good work. You know, because it's difficult for the organisation, but really difficult for individuals as well in that, isn't it? So the quicker they're resolved, the better. So it was on a positive note. I thought that was really good. But yeah, just a few quick points there.
Yeah, so on the military, I'm not aware that we're actually targeting that sector at the moment, so that's definitely something we can think about. Second question was? Retire and return. Yes, there are abatement issues. They have to come back part-time, so we just work within. But the idea is that we speak to staff early on so that when they're considering retiring, we're actually talking to them about coming back part-time hours.
Thank you. Sheila?
Just a really quick question for Sandra. I know she's done a fantastic job with the staff survey, and I particularly one of my areas is the ones that actually is probably the lowest response rate across the trust, which is estates and facilities. And I think there's more we can do. And I've been talking to Lisa, who's the business partner, but I'm just really interested to hear Sandra's ideas, because I know she's got lots around how we could encourage them to be responding, because we want to hear their views.
Yeah, so we have, I think Lisa's been back from maternity leave for about 3 months, and she was appointed as the support services business partner because we didn't have one. And so they have been neglected over the years. So Lisa is working closely, and there are lots of things like we're currently about to buy iPads for across the organisation so that staff can use those iPads for their e-learning and doing the staff survey. It's actually helping them with the technology, but Lisa's working on all of that, and we expect your results to be higher this year, Sheila.
Fiona.
It was just a question around annual leave, just recognising how challenging it's been through COVID and people feeling that they can't take annual leave. Is there any risk around, getting to February, March time and a whole slew of people want to take it then, or kind of assurance it's being managed at the local care group level?
Yeah, so the managers get monthly reports on holiday usage and they can see where the pinch points are. There is an opportunity to carry over this year, but we're managing that carefully because we would actually rather people take their leave, and we'll manage that within the resources because they actually need it.
Kim.
It was just picking up on what you said about the survey. I'm sure this is how it is, so forgive me if I'm saying something that doesn't happen in a day-to-day, but there's a tendency with surveys for a business to believe it's an HR problem, that it's the HR director's responsibility to make sure that everybody fills the survey in. And I just can't stress enough that it's leadership. It's leadership. And there's a responsibility on every single person that's classed as a manager or a leader to make sure that they engage with their people to do so. Because 68 is great, but it should be 98.
Yes.
I know.
Yeah, I think a great point. Couldn't agree more. And actually, you're speaking Sandra's language, Kim. Absolutely. So, and to your point about it being everybody's business, just like finance, absolutely agree. And the thing I think that we found very helpful, and this was led by Sandra, was giving people the week by week, if not day by day towards the end, feedback about their areas and how many and where, and then making it possible for everyone to get involved. So yeah, absolutely, completely agree.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Sandra. Good report. And so we take all the committee reports as read and just take questions if there are. So I'll pause for a moment. If you've got any questions on quality, IARC or finance. Tom.
I just want to put on record that...
Can you make it a bit closer so we can hear you?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, just
okay,
about.
That's better. I just want to put on record that at IARC, both myself and Catherine stood down after the meeting, and Peter will take over as chair.
Thank you. Yeah. Welcome, Peter, in your role as chair of IARC from henceforth in. No other questions? We'll move on to the BAF then, Board Assurance Framework.
So I presented the BAF at IAC. There aren't many significant changes from that report apart from additional commentary from some of the executive directors, and I've indicated which risks those relate to. In terms of just the overview of that, our top 3 risks remain the same, mainly to do with the money and the impact of not having a well-defined, coordinated learning disability and autism pathway, and how it impacts us on our inpatient care provision. We've got 3 high-rated risks there. Again, not a surprise, thinking about the money, quality of safety of services from a CQC perspective, and then recruitment. There's one risk that is being recommended for removal, and that is the CMHT's demand and capacity. And that's because with the new community mental health framework, we need to redefine a risk that captures not just younger adults, but older adults as well. So that's a recommendation to the board to consider removal of that risk. But we were developing a new risk that captures, the whole age spectrum. And then there's a new risk that we've added, clinical engagement, and that's because the team or the clinical engagement to support the delivery of that strategy is not embedded. It is a low-rated risk, and we anticipate that would come off as soon as we've had time to run through the new governance arrangement. So it's those two things that I'm asking the board. One, to note the new low risk which might come off, and then the review of the CMHT demand and capacity one. And of course I'll take any other comments. Not sure if Mark is still on the phone. There was a request from last time to address the red areas in the appendix. We have done that, so you notice that we've indicated where the assurances are coming from.
Thank you.
So we've responded to that.
Thank you. Can I ask a clarification question just to make sure I understand the problem with clinical engagement for the clinical technology strategy? Sheila actually, isn't it? I just wanted to have a sense of what that was.
So we've had a digital governance framework that's been in place in the trust for probably, well, it was here when I first started, so about the last kind of 2.5 years. It's probably not as effective as it needs to be. We've taken it to EAC, we've agreed, also Executive Assurance Committee, we've agreed a new structure to simplify it. We really are keen to get some clinical engagement. We've got a number of clinical people around the organisation that are always involved in kind of technology, but it's really imperative now as we move forward with implementing that strategy that we've got the right level of engagement.
I mean, just to feedback from one of my national meetings that I get involved in with sort of very high up person speaking to us, saying that the whole clinical digital strategy for health, we're miles behind in terms of Europe and some parts of the world, and it's not really, and they're a bit anxious about all this conversation about participation and engagement with a wider audience, because the conversation has to be, it's here to stay, it's got to develop, and it's how we bring people who are currently struggling with us rather than having several parallel systems. So it's an interesting message from on high. So I was just thinking about it in relation to that risk. Mary?
Just to respond to that, Chair, in terms of, I think, as you see, it is a low-rated risk. As part of our Recover and Transform Board and the digitally enabled care workstream that I'm chairing, as I said at the last board meeting, I've never seen so much enthusiasm for people to interact with technology and to want to do things differently. I've just let the team, and it's a multi-professional team, now leading the way and shaping what our systems need to look like. Yeah. So I think they've been given the permission. Just go ahead, use COVID as the place for you to launch yourselves on. And so I anticipate that in the next month, this risk would have come
disappeared
off because of the take-up and the enthusiasm around it.
Brilliant, thank you, Mary. Questions?
Jackie, can I?
So it's a bit startling. Hello, Mark.
Hello, Jackie. Sorry for making you jump. I feel sort of a slight nervousness that our first strategic objective, and I'm looking at page 161 of the pack at this point, our first strategic objective is consistently deliver an outstanding quality of care, and 5875 I understood is being removed and replaced. I guess a couple of thoughts. One would be to separate younger adults and older adults. The second one would be to recognise the risk at team level as opposed to overall level per the earlier discussion. And thirdly, what is in Appendix 1 is incomplete. So for example, it says gaps identified, none identified for CMHTs. And there are huge numbers of gaps, which we discussed at FPC, and Jackie can sort of fill in on when we come to restructure this aspect of the BAF, but I feel very uncomfortable at a board level for the whole board, frankly, that CQC could come in, look at this as sort of the first page, and then look at our IQPR. There needs to be a cohesiveness, or it needs to pass the flinch test that the performance data links with the risk data. Thank you.
Mark, that's well said. And what you can't see are people nodding in the audience here. And so it's presumably a combination of Jackie, Mary, and Sheila somehow between you to respond to that and to make sure that we have a really the right level of detail in the renewed risk. So they're all nodding, Mark, agreeing with you. Any other questions? Sheila, yes.
Just one observation that Catherine has kindly reminded me. So we talked at Finance Committee this week about me potentially drafting something because of the kind of emerging financial risks that we're going to have in the latter part of the 6 months of this year. So I will draft something and we can add that to the next BAF.
Yeah, thank you. No other questions. Any other business? What are we doing about the pub? There is no public, is there?
The public may be watching, but they're
The
not.
public are watching but can't ask questions. I suddenly thought I hadn't checked with Tony. Any other business? It's quite difficult, isn't it, having a board meeting in Mars? We're all a bit subdued, and I'd just like to say to our public that we have had a lively morning of discussion, and the moment we sat down, I'm afraid it's a curious effect on us all. So we're all a little subdued, but we're all fine, really. But we seem to have got through the business of the day. So thank you for that. Thank you for all the reports. Lovely to see you all. The only thing missing is our public. And so I do hope some people are listening in. And we do want you back, but it just isn't feasible at the moment. So I think we now have a short break before the AGM, during which time we have the option of flu injections, and we also, and I'm going to go first and show by example, model by example, and then we also have flu injections if you want after the AGM as well. Tony, when are we due back? 3 o'clock. So could you be in the room by 5 to 3, says Tony sensibly. And where will the flu jabs be taking place?
They're over in the other building area, I think, aren't they? And you've got... Sorry, Mary, go on. No. We'll go and find out. I was told it was in another... But anyway, we'll find out, Sharon, we'll let you know. But if you need a flu vaccination, you've got a form on your table that you need to fill in and take with you, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. See you at 5 to 3.
Thank you. Mary.
Welcome everyone. Lovely to see you all. And this is a slightly unusual AGM for us because we're missing our dear public, although they'll be watching us. So it'll be briefer than usual, but we're hoping to have a bit of a celebration next year at some point where we can really get kind of services together and celebrate all the good things that have happened in KMPT. So my task is to introduce Helen and Sheila and essentially to hand over to you both to present on the year.
Thank you, Chair. So hello to everyone who's watching. I am sure that we've got colleagues out there. I think on our usual AGMs we have a room full of partners, people who use our services, their loved ones, and it's always a joyous afternoon. So I'm, like Jackie, really sorry that we can't be with you in person, but very pleased that actually as a board we all took the decision it was important for us to be together. So this afternoon you can see that we're all here. We've got a couple of colleagues who have dialed in, but we spent the whole day talking about KMPT, the importance of really looking after the people that we're here to serve and making sure that we do the very best we can at all times. So it's good to be here, and I'm just sorry that it feels a bit different, but as you said, Jackie, we'll have a fantastic celebration next year, and then we'll catch up in person with everyone. So Kelly and the comms team have kindly put together a slide deck for us that will just take us through some highlights of the year. So actually, now there was a slide clipper somewhere, wasn't there? Has anyone fantastic, thank you very much. So, welcome to this, our 2020 AGM. So of course we're looking back to April 2019, before anyone had even heard of COVID-19, to April this year. So, and it's odd, I think, when you look back, we were in this exact same room 12 months ago, and none of us had any idea what was coming our way. And in fact, it was only weeks, really, of this year, 2019 to 2020, that COVID-19 dominated, but my goodness, it dominated. And I think when we as a board have said formally, and written in fact formally to all our staff, to say, my goodness, thank you every single one of you. Every single person, I think, has gone above and beyond, and there have been some remarkable acts of kindness and bravery and creativity and all the things that we know we have in spades in this organisation. And we really celebrated that, and I hope that colleagues across the organisation who have yet to take their extra day's annual leave do it. If you haven't taken it yet, please do take it, because that's the least that we could do as a board, to say thank you to all of you for going above and beyond through what has been the most remarkable time. So you can see here just a few examples of the sorts of feedback that people were giving us, and we had a daily message going out that was often populated by feedback from people who were either receiving services and saying how grateful they were that the organisation had flexed itself around what they needed and was working in a different way, or from members of staff who were saying how proud they were to work in this organisation and be part of the wider NHS family, of which we're all so proud. So a truly remarkable end, really, to 2019-20. And of course, it's not over yet, really. So just some context, really. My goodness me, 12,202 referrals to our older people's teams, and we know now that those numbers are going up, so when we're standing here this time next year, that's going to be a bigger number still. 21,719 referrals to our community mental health team. And every single one of those referrals is important. And our ambition, and we were talking about that just this morning and this afternoon, you might have been watching our board meeting in public, my team and I were really being challenged and challenging ourselves, rightly so, to make sure that every single one of those people has a really consistently high quality experience of coming to us. So appointments aren't cancelled, we follow the right pathway, the care and treatment that people get is of the highest quality. And look at all those people that came into our care in our wards. Again, really important that every single one of those had as good an experience as we could make it, and that's what we're concentrating on. It's been a busy year, so if you park for one moment thinking about COVID and all the activity that generated, we've had some significant work, and you can see some examples there. And I think we were talking earlier about the work that we've been doing now for a couple of years on our cultural heart, we call it in KMPT, and what it is that makes us us. Bless you, Sandra. and what it is that we all contribute to making this the best organisation that it can possibly be. So there are some highlights of my year, and you can see there actually the Bridge House team and Mark, who is one of our people with a lived experience, who now works at Bridge House and is making a huge difference every day to the people that we serve there. Really impressive services. I mentioned our cultural heart. I was looking back at these slides this morning and thinking actually we've touched on every one of these aspects during today's discussion about how we're working as an organisation, where our aspirations are and how we're getting there. And we've got a really simple strapline: brilliant care through brilliant people. That's what we want to do, really, provide brilliant care through brilliant people. In order to do that, of course, you've got to have the best possible people and hold on to them and attract even more brilliant people. And so the work that we've been doing on our cultural heart makes sure that we put that right at the centre of everything we do. From the moment someone thinks about joining us or thinks about leaving us, we're thinking about how we can work with them. We started our public board meeting this afternoon. That was so nice, wasn't it, to be able to make an award. So Jackie and I were able to hand over a national award from Health Service Journal to our brilliant vocational rehabilitation service that helps people get back to work. And they won this year the national award for the best value service, and it's a really inspiring service with people right at its heart, getting people back to the best and where they want to be. So that's a very recent award, but here you can see over the year some other things that we wore that were won, and makes you very proud really that these are things that are going on daily and that are recognised nationally. And I think we've got much better as an organisation in this last year even, like making sure that when we know we're doing something that's either very exceptional or extremely good, that we're out there and making sure others know about it too. So very important. Research and development. This is something when Dr. Afifa Kazi, our Executive Medical Director, leads on, and we're on the verge really of really going for it now, Afifa, aren't we? But in the last year, still, we've got a very impressive, solid track record of being very good recruiters. So at the moment, we're one of the highest recruiters to research studies in the country for our sort of organisation. And our ambition now is to start developing our own original research instead of just doing it on behalf of other people. But fantastic that we're involved in these very high profile and, most importantly, improving things for people who use our services and their loved ones as a result of the research that we're engaged in. So, looking ahead, everyone's talking nationally about recovering after the pandemic. So what are we doing to get the NHS back to where it was? And again, we talked about that just this morning, and keeping ourselves closely held to account about what we're changing, what we're doing, how we're making sure that if we've been using virtual appointments with people, and that's worked for people, we keep doing it. We don't just go back to how we were before. Better, safer buildings, so important. Making sure that people who work in the NHS are physically healthy, mentally healthy, really important. So, we talked about this too, it has all joined up, hasn't it? It's great because you can just see these themes coming together. So this is the NHS People Plan, so the commitments that have been very simply set out by the National People Director, Prina Azar. And it speaks loudly, I think, to us as an organisation. We don't have to do much to accept it. It resonates with where we are and what we want. So this is our commitment to working with the NHS People Promise, and I think that rainbow is a really good place to be. So a busy year, a positive year. We are, as you all know, and you who are watching will know, by no means perfect. We've got 101 things that we need to sort out and things that we are aggravated by and we still haven't got right, but we're absolutely up for it. And it's been a busy year, I think ending in a good place. So at that point, I'm going to hand over to Sheila.
Disinfect it. That's my role.
Thank you, Helen. So I'm going to talk to you about our financial performance for the last financial year. I'm pleased to say that we met all of our... Sorry, I'll try this one. I'm pleased to say we met all of our financial targets for 19-20.
So we were set a control total of a break-even position during 1920. As the table kind of sets out, quite a large number of numbers on here, but we did deliver a £4.2 million surplus, so we did £4.2 million better than what we were planning to last financial year. So that was a big achievement for us as a trust, and we've had some real focus on our financial position in the last few years. The main reasons for that were we had an unutilised contingency that we used on a non-recurrent basis. We received an additional £1 million, as did many of the other mental health trusts across the country, for performing well during the year. And we also had a number of vacancies that we hadn't covered as part of kind of bank and agency. We also had a rather large impairment at year end. We had a new trust valuer who valued our estate slightly differently, and that led to an impairment of £18.7 million. But that was the first time we'd had a full evaluation in the last 5 years. In terms of our cost improvement plans for 1920, we set a target of 6 million, and I'm pleased to say we delivered a 5.6 million of that target. So there was a small gap of 400k at year end. The good news for KMPT was actually we delivered 68% of that on a recurrent basis and 32% on a non-recurrent basis, and that's very different to where we've been in the past. In the past we would have been delivering CIPs recurrently at about 30%. So it's been a real big change, and that's credit to our clinical care groups really, and all the hard work they've done to look for efficiencies during the last financial year. We received income of 202 million in total. 76% of that came from our clinical commissioning groups. 13% came from NHS England, so a total of like almost 90% from 2 main commissioners. We also received 6 million financial recovery fund, because we do have an underlying deficit as a trust, and that is a fund that all trusts with a deficit have been receiving. So we did receive 6 million last year, which is about 3% of our income. The rest of our income is made up really of education, but also non-patient from service level agreements that we have with other organisations for renting space, etc. In terms of our expenditure, we spent 212 million last year. So 73% of that, you won't be surprised, is on our pay bill for the organisation. So 63% was on our substantive permanent staff, 7% on bank and 3% on agency. So a total spend of 150 million. Non-pay is obviously a large element as well, just over £30 million. We have our general finance costs and then our depreciation really, and our capital charges that we pay. As Helen also referenced, we have quite significant really and a really ambitious estate strategy. So we're really focused on where we're spending our capital money to improve our buildings. So we did spend 8 million last year on our capital expenditure. So 2 million of that was on the Heather Ward refurbishment in Canterbury. We spent 1 million of that on our Willow Suite, which is our psychiatric intensive care unit. Another 600k on the Canterbury site reconfiguration, a big programme for us last year. 600,000 on a new medication system, which is a project that's ongoing currently and is much needed in the organisation. And then we spent just over 1.4 million on our capital, or our kind of maintenance and minor schemes of keeping our buildings where they need to be, and then 600k on IT devices, making sure that all of our staff have the IT equipment they need. So looking forward to where we are now in 2021, so as Helen said, none of us expected to be in this situation with a kind of global pandemic. Originally the Trust was set a plan again of break even, and we were going to be receiving some financial recovery fund of 5.4 million to support us. In light of the kind of situation globally with COVID, we've all been asked nationally to deliver a break-even position, and we are currently doing that at KMPT at the end of month 5. So our patient care income that we normally negotiate with our commissioners has been set on a block whilst we work through this financial year. We have received £3.2 million up to the end of month 5 for COVID-related costs. So quite a significant spend for us in the first 5 months. But we are focusing, and there is a big focus from the national guidance that's just been released, for us to continue to focus on productivity and efficiency and making sure that we've still got that sound internal governance control in the organisation. We have set a cost improvement programme of 5.9 million this year. We've delivered 1.4 million to date, and we've got 2 million that's unidentified, but I did talk about that in the public board earlier, and we are pushing forward to try and close that gap before the end of the financial year. That's probably all to say really on finance.
Sheila, thanks very much, Helen. And I think normally, of course, we would take questions from the public, but we are definitely open to taking questions from board members here. So, over to you. Are there any questions?
Through the chair, can I just check with the Trust Secretariat whether there have been any questions from members of the public lodged with the Secretariat, Tony? No. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I think this partly signifies the fact that we've had very thorough public boards throughout the year, actually, and despite the pandemic, and people are very well sighted on all the issues in front of board. So, it was nice to meet you. Thank you very much. Another year gone by, and so we're really, really hoping so much that next year we will have a big celebration and a proper, what I would call a proper AGM as opposed to a limited AGM. That would be great. And thank you for coming along today. It's been great to see everyone, and thank you for